The man thought he bought a smart cat, but the next morning he was hated. The world, to me, had always been a canvas of muted grays. Not the dull, dreary gray of a rainy day, but a symphony of soft, subtle shades of the charcoal gray of twilight, the pearly gray of dawn, the smoky gray of shadows dancing on sun-drenched walls. My fur, a masterpiece of nature's artistry, mirrored this muted palette, each strand a delicate blend of silver and ash, creating a coat that shimmered like moonlight on still water. He was born into a world of warmth and safety, a cozy haven filled with the comforting scent of my mother's milk and the playful tumbles of my siblings. We were a family of felines, each unique in our own way, yet bound by the invisible threads of kinship. Our days were spent in a blissful cycle of napping, nursing, and exploring our limited domain, a small, cluttered apartment that, to our unworldly eyes, seemed like a vast and wondrous kingdom. My mother, a wise and gentle creature with eyes like amber gems, often regaled us with tales of the outside world, a place of endless wonders and hidden dangers. She spoke of towering trees that scraped the sky, of scurrying creatures that rustled in the undergrowth, and of humans, the enigmatic beings who provided us with food and shelter. He yearned to experience this world beyond our walls, to chase the elusive sunbeams that streamed through the window, to unravel the mysteries hidden in the rustling leaves outside. But my mother warned us of the perils that lurked beyond our sanctuary, of the dangers that awaited unsuspecting kittens. One day, the world as he knew it shattered. A strange human, with eyes that held a glint of greed, entered our haven. His touch was rough, his voice harsh, and his scent filled me with a primal fear he had never known before. He scooped me up, ignoring my frantic struggles and plaintive cries, and placed me in a cold, dark box. The journey was a blur of jarring movements and unsettling sounds. When the box finally opened, he found myself in a sterile, brightly lit room, the air thick with the pungent smell of chemicals. The human, his face now masked with an unsettling smile, held me down as another human, clad in white, approached with a syringe. A sharp prick, a burning sensation, and then a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world around me spun, the colors blurring and distorting until everything faded to black. When he awoke, the world had changed. The grays that had once defined my vision were gone, replaced by a jarring kaleidoscope of colors. My fur, once a source of pride, now felt alien and unfamiliar, a patchwork of unnatural hues that clashed with my muted perception. He looked at my reflection in a shiny metal surface and recoiled in horror. The creature staring back at me was a stranger, a grotesque mockery of my former self. He was no longer the cat he once was, the cat he was meant to be. He had become an anomaly, a curiosity, a commodity to be bought and sold. And in the depths of my feline heart, a seed of resentment began to grow, a silent vow to reclaim the identity that had been stolen from me. The days that followed were a blur of confinement and confusion. He was kept in a small cage, surrounded by unfamiliar scents and sounds. The humans who came and went regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, their voices echoing with an unnatural excitement that set my teeth on edge. One day, a new human arrived. He was older than the others, with kind eyes that held a hint of sadness. He spoke softly, his voice a gentle rumble that calmed my frayed nerves. He reached into the cage, his touch hesitant at first, then growing more confident as he leaned into his hand, seeking the comfort he so desperately craved. The man, whose name he later learned was James, took me home with him. His house was a haven of quietude, filled with the comforting scent of old books and freshly brewed coffee. He treated me with a tenderness that he had never experienced before, his every touch a balm to my wounded spirit. He spoke to me in soft tones, sharing stories of his life, his hopes, his regrets. He listened intently, my feline heart warming to the sound of his voice. He sensed a deep loneliness within him, a void that mirrored my own. Despite the lingering unease about my altered appearance, he found myself drawn to James. He provided me with a soft bed, delicious food, and endless strokes and cuddles. He seemed genuinely delighted by my presence, his face lighting up whenever he entered the room. He began to explore my new surroundings, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The house was a treasure trove of fascinating objects, soft blankets to knead, sunbeams to chase, and towering bookshelves to climb. He discovered a particular fondness for James's armchair, its worn leather offering a comforting warmth and the lingering scent of his presence. As the days turned into weeks, he settled into a comfortable routine. He would wake James each morning with a gentle nudge and a soft purr, then curl up on his lap while he sipped his coffee and read the newspaper. We would spend our days together, he working at his desk, he perched on a nearby shelf, watching him with quiet affection. In the evenings, we would settle on the sofa, James reading aloud from his favorite books, his voice a soothing melody that lulled me into a peaceful slumber. He felt a sense of belonging, a connection to this kind, lonely man that transcended the deception that had brought us together. Despite the lingering unease about my unnatural appearance, he began to feel a sense of peace. Perhaps, he thought, this was where he was meant to be, with this man who saw beyond the surface, who valued my companionship despite the deception that had brought us together. Life with James settled into a comfortable rhythm. My days, once filled with the muted grays of my natural vision, were now punctuated by the vibrant hues of James's world. The deep reds of his favorite armchair, the warm yellows of the kitchen where he cooked his simple meals, the vibrant greens of the small garden he tended with such care. He learned his routines, his habits, the subtle shifts in his mood, the way his shoulders slumped a little more when the mail brought bills instead of letters, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke on the phone to his daughter, the way he hummed softly to himself when he was content. James, in turn, seemed to delight in my presence. He'd talk to me about his day, his worries, his small triumphs. He'd chuckle when he chased dust motes in the sunbeams, his laughter filling the quiet house with a warmth that spread through me like a comforting purr. He bought me toys, a ridiculous array of feathered mice, jingling balls, and crinkling tunnels. He'd spend hours trying to engage me in play, his face a mixture of childlike glee and gentle frustration when I'd inevitably tire of the game and curl up on his lap for a nap. He found myself reciprocating his affection. I'd greet him at the door with enthusiastic head bumps and weave between his legs as he moved about the house. I'd even, occasionally, indulge him in a game of chase, batting at his outstretched hand with playful paws. But beneath the surface of this newfound contentment, a disquiet lingered. My fur, still a jarring clash of unnatural colors, felt like a constant reminder of the deception that had brought me to James. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes, a troubled look in his eyes, and I'd wonder if he, too, felt the weight of the lie. One day, while grooming myself, he noticed a change. A patch of fur on my back, once a vibrant orange, seemed to have dulled, a hint of gray peeking through. He panicked, frantically licking and scratching at the spot, as if he could somehow erase the evidence of my true nature. Over the following days, the change became more pronounced. Patches of gray spread across my coat, like a creeping tide reclaiming its territory. The vibrant colors that had once defined me began to fade, replaced by the familiar muted tones of my natural fur. He felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, confusion, and a flicker of something akin to relief. It was as if my body was rejecting the artifice, shedding the disguise that had been forced upon me. But what would this mean for my life with James? Would he still love me when the illusion was shattered? When the cat he thought he'd bought was revealed to be nothing more than an ordinary gray tabby, the question hung heavy in the air, a silent threat to the fragile peace we had built together. The changes in my fur became impossible to ignore. What started as subtle shifts became a dramatic transformation. Swathes of gray overtook the vibrant, unnatural colors. My once jarringly mismatched coat was slowly returning to its original muted palette. James at first seemed oblivious to the change. He was preoccupied with a looming deadline at work, his days filled with tense phone calls and frustrated sighs. He'd absent-mindedly stroke my head as he paced the room, his brow furrowed in concentration. But one evening, as he curled up beside him on the sofa, he finally noticed. He ran his hand down my back, his touch faltering as he encountered the unfamiliar texture of my returning gray fur. He pulled back, holding me at arm's length, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" he muttered, his voice laced with confusion. He turned me over, examining me with a growing sense of alarm. He parted the fur on my back, revealing the stark contrast between the remaining patches of unnatural color and the encroaching gray. A wave of panic washed over me. He could sense his disappointment, the betrayal he must have felt. He tried to nuzzle his hand, to reassure him that he was still the same cat, the cat he had grown to love. But he pulled away, his touch now hesitant, almost wary. The next day he took me to the vet. The sterile environment filled me with anxiety, the unfamiliar scents and sounds triggering a primal fear. The vet, a kind woman with gentle hands, examined me thoroughly, her brow furrowed in concern. She spoke to James in hushed tones, using words he didn't understand. But he could sense the gravity of the situation, the weight of her pronouncements. James's face grew pale, his shoulders slumping with each passing word. Finally, the vet turned to me, her expression softening. "Well, little one," she said, her voice gentle, "it seems you've been quite the chameleon." She explained to James in simpler terms what he had already suspected. My fur had been artificially dyed, a cruel trick to increase my value. The dye was now fading, revealing my true, ordinary self. James was furious. He railed against the injustice, the deception, the sheer audacity of the people who had sold me to him. He vowed to find them, to hold them accountable for their actions. But beneath his anger, he sensed a deeper hurt, a sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss. He had been deceived, tricked into believing he was something he was not. And now, faced with the reality of my ordinariness, he seemed to struggle to reconcile his feelings. As we left the vet's office, he felt a chill of apprehension. The fragile bond we had built, the sense of belonging he had found, seemed to hang in the balance. He had been brought into his life under false pretenses, and now, with the truth revealed, he feared he would lose the only home he had ever known. The car ride home was tense. James gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched tight. He sat on the passenger seat, curled into a tight ball, my tail tucked close. The silence in the car was thick with unspoken words, heavy with disappointment and a growing sense of unease. When we arrived home, James carried me inside, his touch now devoid of the warmth and affection he had grown accustomed to. He placed me on the floor, his gaze lingering on me for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Then, with a sigh, he turned and walked away, disappearing into his study, closing the door softly behind him. He was left alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The house, once a haven of comfort and warmth, now felt cold and empty. The silence that had once been peaceful now echoed with the weight of James's unspoken disappointment. He wandered from room to room, seeking his presence, hoping for a reassuring touch, a kind word. But he remained secluded in his study, the muffled sounds of his movements a constant reminder of his distance. As the days passed, the chasm between us widened. James continued to care for me, providing food and water, cleaning my litter box. But the warmth, the affection, the playful banter that had once characterized our relationship were gone. He would often stare at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. He could sense his struggle, the conflict between the affection he still held for me and the betrayal he felt. He tried to bridge the gap, to remind him of the bond we had shared. He would rub against his legs, purring loudly, hoping to elicit a smile, a gentle stroke. But his response was always the same, a fleeting touch, a distracted pat, his eyes filled with a distant longing. He felt like an imposter, a fraud. The vibrant colors that had once made me unique were fading, revealing the ordinary tabby beneath. He was no longer the special cat he had paid a small fortune for, the cat he had showered with affection and attention. He was just a cat, an ordinary, unremarkable cat. The realization stung, a bitter truth that gnawed at my feline pride. He had been valued for something he was not, loved for an illusion. And now, with the illusion shattered, he feared he was no longer worthy of his love. The shadow of doubt loomed over me, casting a pall over my once contented existence. He yearned for the days when James's eyes had sparkled with joy at my presence, when his touch had been filled with warmth and affection. But those days seemed like a distant memory, a fading dream, and as he watched James retreat further into himself, he couldn't help but wonder if our bond, once so strong, would ever be the same again. The house grew quieter. James, consumed by his disappointment and perhaps a touch of shame, retreated further into himself. His work became his refuge. His study door often closed, the soft glow of his computer screen casting long shadows late into the night. Meals became perfunctory affairs. He'd set down my bowl with a distracted air, his eyes avoiding mine. The playful chatter that once accompanied our meals was replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the clinking of his fork against the plate. Evenings, once a time for shared companionship on the sofa, were now spent in solitude. James would sit in his armchair, a book in his hands, but his gaze often drifted towards the empty space beside him, the space he used to occupy. He watched him from my perch on the windowsill, my heart aching with a loneliness that mirrored his own. He longed to jump onto his lap, to nuzzle his hand, to remind him of the comfort we once found in each other's presence. But a fear, new and unfamiliar, held me back. He feared his rejection, the subtle push away, the unspoken message that he was no longer welcome in his space. So he remained at a distance, a silent observer of his growing isolation. One day, James received a phone call. His voice, usually calm and measured, rose in alarm. He spoke in short, clipped sentences, his words laced with worry and a hint of panic. When he hung up, his face was pale, his hands trembling. He rushed out of the house, leaving me alone with the echoes of his distress. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity of anxious waiting. The house creaked and groaned around me, the ticking of the clock a relentless reminder of the passing time. When James finally returned, he looked haggard and defeated. He sank into his armchair, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the empty fireplace. He crept closer, drawn by his palpable sadness. He reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly over my head. He leaned into his touch, a silent plea for reassurance. He stroked my fur, his touch gentle but lacking its usual warmth. "My father," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He's gone." He didn't understand the words, but he understood the grief that emanated from him, the wave of sadness that washed over him, threatening to drown him in its depths. He pressed closer, my purr a soft rumble against his chest, offering what little comfort he could. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my fur. His body shook with silent sobs, his tears soaking into my coat. He held him close, my own heart aching for his pain. In that moment, the deception, the anger, the disappointment, all faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the shared grief, the unspoken bond of two souls seeking solace in each other's presence. As the night wore on, we remained entwined, two lonely beings finding comfort in the shared weight of sorrow. And in the quiet darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged, a fragile thread of connection that promised to weave its way through the darkness, leading us towards a new dawn. The days following James's father's passing were a blur of hushed phone calls, somber visits, and the constant presence of well-meaning but intrusive relatives. He watched as James navigated the rituals of grief, his face etched with a weariness that went beyond mere sadness. He moved through the motions with a quiet stoicism, attending to the necessary arrangements, fielding condolences, and offering comfort to his grieving sister. But beneath the composed exterior, he sensed a deep well of sorrow, a pain that threatened to consume him. He became his shadow, following him from room to room, a silent presence offering wordless support. I'd curl up at his feet as he sat staring into the fireplace, the flames mirroring the turmoil in his eyes. I'd brush against his legs as he paced the hallway, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his loss. He seemed to find solace in my presence, a quiet companionship that demanded nothing in return. He'd often reach down to stroke my fur, his touch now carrying a new tenderness, a vulnerability that he hadn't seen before. One evening, as he sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, he spoke to me, his voice low and husky. He loved cats, you know, he said, his gaze fixed on the fading light. My father. He always had one by his side. He paused, a wistful smile gracing his lips. He used to say that cats had a way of seeing into your soul, of knowing when you needed comfort, when you needed a friend. He looked down at me, his eyes filled with a warmth that rekindled a flicker of hope in my heart. "He think he would have liked you," he said softly. The words, simple yet profound, pierced through the fog of grief that had enveloped us. They were an acknowledgement, a recognition of the bond we shared, despite the deception that had brought us together. In that moment, he felt a shift in our relationship. The shadow of doubt that had lingered between us began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of connection. James seemed to see me, truly see me, for the first time since the truth of my origins had been revealed. He began to talk to me more, sharing his memories of his father, his childhood, his hopes and fears for the future. He spoke of his regrets, the things left unsaid, the opportunities missed. And he listened, offering silent companionship and the unwavering support that only a cat can provide. As the weeks turned into months, the sharp edges of grief began to soften. Laughter returned to the house, tentative at first, then growing stronger with each passing day. James started to spend more time outdoors, tending to his neglected garden, the vibrant colors of blooming flowers a testament to his renewed spirit. And I, the once unwanted, the ordinary tabby cat, found myself firmly entrenched in his life, a constant companion, a furry confidant, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love and companionship can bloom in the most unexpected places. Spring arrived, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope and a burst of life. The garden, once a neglected patch of weeds, was now a riot of color, a testament to James's dedication and a symbol of his own reawakening. He spent hours tending to his plants, his hands gently coaxing life from the soil. I'd often join him, basking in the warm sunshine, chasing butterflies, and occasionally lending a helping paw by batting at the dangling tendrils of climbing vines. James seemed to find solace in the rhythm of nature, the cycle of growth and renewal mirroring his own journey of healing. He'd talk to his plants, whispering words of encouragement, sharing his thoughts and feelings with the silent, unjudging audience. One day, while weeding a flower bed, he unearthed a small, forgotten bird bath. He cleaned it carefully, filling it with fresh water and placing it amongst the flowers. Soon, it became a haven for a variety of birds, their cheerful songs filling the garden with a symphony of life. He watched from the windowsill, my heart swelling with a quiet joy. The house, once filled with the echoes of grief and loneliness, now resonated with the sounds of life, of laughter, of a man rediscovering his connection to the world around him. James started to venture out more, exploring the local parks, visiting museums, and even attending a few community events. He seemed to be seeking connection, a way to fill the void left by his father's passing. He joined a book club, his love of literature rekindled by the shared passion of fellow enthusiasts. He volunteered at a local animal shelter, his empathy for abandoned creatures a reflection of his own journey of acceptance and belonging. And through it all, he remained his constant companion, a furry anchor in the sometimes turbulent waters of his life. We'd go for walks together, exploring the neighborhood, my presence a comforting weight on his heels. We'd curl up on the sofa in the evenings, sharing quiet moments of contentment, the silence between us now a comfortable companion rather than a heavy burden. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, James turned to me, his eyes filled with a warmth that melted my heart. "You know," he said, his voice soft and sincere, "he used to think he was cheated, that he was tricked into buying you." He paused, stroking my fur with a gentle hand. But now he realized he was given a gift of companionship, of unconditional love, of a furry friend who helped me through the darkest of times. His words, a balm to my soul, washed away the last vestiges of doubt and insecurity. He was no longer the unwanted, the ordinary tabby cat. He was James's cat, his companion, his friend. And in that realization, he found a sense of belonging, a purpose that transcended the deception that had brought us together. The world, once a canvas of muted grays, was now filled with vibrant hues, a testament to the transformative power of love and acceptance. And as he looked into James's eyes, he knew that we had found something truly special, a bond that went beyond the superficial, a connection that would last a lifetime. James's transformation was remarkable. The grief that had once weighed him down like an anchor began to lift, replaced by a newfound lightness of being. He rediscovered his zest for life, his laughter echoing through the house once more, filling the rooms with a warmth that chased away the lingering shadows of sorrow. His newfound energy extended beyond the walls of our home. He became more involved in the community, attending local events, volunteering at the animal shelter, and even joining the neighborhood watch. He seemed determined to make a difference, to connect with others, to leave his mark on the world. One day, he came home with a stack of flyers and a mischievous glint in his eyes. He showed me the flyer, a picture of a cute kitten with the words, "Adopt, don't shop," emblazoned across the top. "I've decided to organize an adoption event at the shelter," he announced, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "We're going to find loving homes for all those deserving animals." He spent the next few weeks consumed by his project, designing posters, contacting local businesses, and recruiting volunteers. He watched him with admiration, my heart swelling with pride at his dedication and compassion. The adoption event was a resounding success. Dozens of animals found their forever homes, their happy meows and playful barks filling the air with a symphony of joy. James, beaming with satisfaction, was the heart and soul of the event, his passion for animal welfare infectious. He even gave a short speech, sharing his own story of finding companionship in an unexpected place. He spoke of the deception he had faced, the anger and disappointment he had felt. But he also spoke of the transformative power of love, the way he had helped him heal, the way he had shown him the true meaning of companionship. His words resonated with the crowd, many of whom had their own stories of finding solace and joy in the company of animals. As he spoke, he felt a wave of warmth wash over me, a sense of purpose that transcended my own individual existence. He realized that our story, born from deception and tinged with sadness, had become a catalyst for change, a ripple effect spreading outwards, touching the lives of others. James, through his own journey of healing, had become an advocate for animal welfare, a beacon of hope for those seeking connection and companionship. And I, the once unwanted, the ordinary tabby cat, had played a small but significant role in this transformation. He had been a silent witness to his grief, a furry shoulder to cry on, a constant reminder of the enduring power of love. As he watched James interact with the excited adopters, his face alight with joy, he knew that our story was far from over. We had found each other, two lonely souls seeking solace and companionship. And together we were making a difference, one paw print at a time. Life settled into a new rhythm, one filled with purpose and contentment. James, no longer defined by his grief or the deception that had brought us together, embraced his new role as an advocate for animal welfare. He became a regular fixture at the shelter, volunteering his time, organizing fundraising events, and even fostering kittens in need of temporary homes. Our house, once a sanctuary of solitude, was now often filled with the playful antics of foster kittens. Initially wary of these tiny intruders, found myself drawn to their boundless energy and innocent charm. He became a surrogate mother of sorts, teaching them the feline ropes, offering gentle guidance, and sharing the warmth of my purrs. James, watching our interactions with a fond smile, would often remark on my maternal instincts, marveling at the way he nurtured and cared for these vulnerable creatures. He saw in me a reflection of his own compassion, a testament to the transformative power of love and acceptance. One day, a new family arrived at the shelter, their eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were a young couple, eager to adopt their first pet, their hearts set on a kitten. James, ever the matchmaker, introduced them to a litter of playful tabbies, their gray fur speckled with white. As the couple interacted with the kittens, their laughter echoing through the room, he felt a tug at my heartstrings, a sense of familiarity that transcended mere physical resemblance. These kittens, with their muted gray coats and playful personalities, reminded me of my own siblings, the family he had lost so long ago. James, sensing my interest, gently scooped me up and brought me closer to the enclosure. The kittens, curious and fearless, reached out with tiny paws, their innocent eyes filled with wonder. He felt a surge of affection, a maternal instinct that he had never known before. The young couple, witnessing this tender exchange, were touched by the connection between us. They decided to adopt not one, but two of the kittens, ensuring they would have each other for company and support. As they left the shelter, their arms filled with furry bundles of joy, he felt a sense of completion, a circle closing. The deception that had brought me to James, the grief that had threatened to consume him, had all led to this moment, this act of kindness and compassion. We had come full circle, from a place of loneliness and loss to a life filled with purpose and connection. And as he watched the young couple walk away, their faces beaming with happiness, he knew that our story, born from adversity, had blossomed into something truly beautiful. The world, once a canvas of muted grays, was now painted in vibrant hues, a testament to the enduring power of love, acceptance, and the transformative bond between humans and their animal companions. And as he curled up beside James, his hand gently stroking my fur, he knew that we had found our forever home, a place where love, laughter, and the gentle purr of contentment would forever reign.
The old man rescued a cat stuck in thorns, but the cat rescued him from something deeper. The late September sun cast long, slanted shadows across the small, meticulously kept garden. Arthur Miller, 78 years young but feeling every one of those years in his aching joints, knelt carefully beside a young sapling, a golden delicious apple tree he'd planted just that morning. His hands, gnarled and spotted with age, gently patted the soil around the base, a familiar ritual that brought him a measure of peace. Arthur's garden was a sanctuary, a small patch of green carved out of the suburban sprawl of Harmony Creek, Pennsylvania. It wasn't much to look at a modest rectangle behind his equally modest bungalow, but it was his. Every tree, every shrub, every carefully placed stepping stone held a memory, a piece of his life. The ancient, gnarled peach tree in the corner had been planted by his late wife, Clara, their first year in the house, nearly 50 years ago. The rose bushes, now fading into their autumn slumber, had been her pride and joy. He stood up slowly, his back protesting with a familiar creak, and surveyed his domain. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth, a smell that always stirred a deep melancholy within him. Autumn had always been Clara's favorite season. She loved the vibrant colors, the cozy evenings, the promise of Thanksgiving and Christmas just around the corner. But for Arthur, autumn was a reminder of what he'd lost. Clara had passed away 5 years ago, after a swift and brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. The silence of the house, once filled with her laughter and the comforting clatter of her knitting needles was now a constant, heavy presence. His two children, Michael and Sarah, lived far away. Michael in California with his tech startup, Sarah in Colorado with her husband and two rambunctious boys. They called, of course, and visited when they could, but their lives were full, vibrant, and distant. Arthur understood. He wouldn't want them to put their lives on hold for him. But the understanding didn't fill the void. He spent his days tending to his garden, reading on the porch swing, always with Clara's worn, woolen blanket draped over his legs, even when it wasn't cold, and watching the endless parade of news and cooking shows on television. He went through the motions of living, a ghost haunting his own life. He cooked simple meals, ate them alone at the kitchen table, and went to bed early, finding solace only in the oblivion of sleep. The garden was his only real connection to the world. He talked to the trees, whispered encouragement to the struggling tomato plants, and even apologized to the weeds as he pulled them from the earth. It was a silent conversation, a one-sided dialogue with the natural world, but it was better than nothing. One afternoon, as he was pruning the last of the summer's roses, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A flash of orange fur darted between the fruit trees, disappearing behind the thick trunk of the old peach tree. Arthur paused, his pruning shears held midair. He hadn't seen a stray cat in the neighborhood for years. The local animal control was quite efficient, and most of his neighbors kept their pets indoors. He waited, watching patiently, and a few moments later, the cat reappeared. It was a ginger tom, a large, fluffy creature with a confident swagger. It paused beneath a low-hanging branch of the apricot tree, its eyes fixed on a ripe, golden fruit just out of reach. With a graceful leap, it sprang onto the branch, its claws finding purchase on the bark. It stretched, its body elongating like a furry accordion, and snatched the apricot in its jaws. Arthur watched, a faint smile playing on his lips. He'd always had a soft spot for cats, though Clara had been allergic, so they'd never been able to have one. This one was a bold fellow, a pirate raiding his orchard. The cat, apricot firmly in its mouth, jumped down from the branch and trotted away, disappearing behind the shed at the back of the garden. Arthur finished his pruning, the image of the ginger cat lingering in his mind. It was a small thing, a fleeting moment of amusement, but it was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in weeks. He found himself hoping the cat would return. The silence of the garden, for the first time in a long while, felt a little less heavy. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, mirroring the color of the feline intruder. Arthur went inside, the faint scent of apricots and the memory of a ginger tail disappearing into the shadows accompanying him. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years' anticipation. The ginger cat, whom Arthur had started calling Rusty in his head, became a regular visitor. At first, he only appeared every few days, a fleeting glimpse of orange fur among the trees. But gradually, he became bolder, his visits more frequent, his presence more pronounced. Rusty was, without a doubt, a thief. He had a particular fondness for Arthur's fruit trees, treating them like his personal buffet. He'd scale the peach tree with surprising agility for such a large cat, nimbly navigating the branches to reach the ripest fruit. He'd stalk the apricot tree, his eyes gleaming with predatory intent, pouncing on any fruit that dared to fall within his reach. He even developed a taste for the apples, though he seemed to prefer the softer, sweeter varieties. Arthur initially tried to shoo him away. He'd clap his hands, shout, "Hey, get out of there," and even wave his gardening trowel threateningly. But Rusty was unfazed. He'd simply stare at Arthur with his wide, amber eyes, a look that seemed to say, "You in what army, old man?" Then, he'd calmly continue his pilfering. After a while, Arthur gave up. He found he couldn't really be angry with the cat. There was something so charmingly audacious about his thievery, so unapologetically feline, that it was hard to stay mad. Besides, Arthur had more fruit than he could possibly eat himself. The squirrels and birds got their share, and now, apparently, so did Rusty. He started leaving a small bowl of water out by the back porch, just in case Rusty got thirsty after his fruity feasts. He'd watch from the kitchen window as the cat lapped delicately at the water, his pink tongue flicking in and out. It was a strangely satisfying sight. One particularly sunny afternoon, Arthur was weeding around the base of his rose bushes when he heard a frantic scrabbling sound. He looked up, searching for the source of the noise. It was coming from the dense, thorny thicket of a wild rose bush that grew along the back fence, a sprawling, untamed thing that Clara had always refused to prune, claiming it provided a haven for birds. He approached cautiously, peering into the tangled branches. There, wedged deep within the thorny embrace of the bush, was Rusty. He was struggling furiously, his claws scrabbling against the branches, his body twisting and turning in a desperate attempt to free himself. He let out a series of panicked meows, his usual confident swagger completely gone. Arthur realized what had happened. Rusty, in his pursuit of a bird or perhaps a particularly tempting bug, had ventured too far into the thicket and gotten himself hopelessly stuck. The thorns, sharp and unforgiving, were holding him fast. For a moment, Arthur hesitated. He knew those thorns were nasty. He'd pricked himself countless times while trying to tame the wild rose bush. Getting Rusty out wouldn't be easy, and it would almost certainly involve some pain. But he couldn't just leave him there. The cat was clearly distressed, and the more he struggled, the more entangled he became. Arthur sighed, a mixture of exasperation and concern filling him. He went back to the shed and retrieved his thickest gardening gloves, a pair of heavy-duty leather ones that reached almost to his elbows. He also grabbed his pruning shears, just in case. Returning to the thicket, he spoke to Rusty in a soothing voice. "Easy there, fella. I'm going to get you out. Just try to stay still." Rusty, however, was in no mood to stay still. He continued to struggle, his meows growing more frantic. Arthur carefully reached into the thicket, trying to avoid the sharpest thorns. He gently grasped Rusty's body, trying to get a firm hold without hurting him. The cat hissed and spat, his claws extending and retracting, but Arthur held on. It was a slow, painstaking process. Arthur had to carefully snip away some of the branches that were trapping Rusty, all while trying to avoid getting scratched or impaled himself. The thorns snagged on his gloves, and several times he felt a sharp prick through the leather. But he persevered, talking to Rusty in a low, calming voice, assuring him that he was almost free. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Arthur managed to pull Rusty out of the thicket. The cat was trembling, his fur matted and covered in leaves and twigs. He had a few scratches on his nose, and one of his ears was bleeding slightly. Arthur carried him back to the porch, setting him down gently on the old, faded welcome mat. Rusty didn't run away. He just sat there, hunched over, looking utterly dejected. Arthur knelt beside him, examining his injuries. They didn't seem too serious, mostly superficial scratches. "You gave me a scare, you silly cat," Arthur said softly, his voice filled with relief. He stroked Rusty's head gently, and to his surprise, the cat didn't flinch away. Instead, he leaned into Arthur's touch, a faint purr rumbling in his chest. It was the first time Rusty had allowed Arthur to touch him, the first sign of trust between them. The rescue, it seemed, had changed everything. Arthur brought a bowl of warm water and a soft cloth from the kitchen and gently cleaned Rusty's wounds. The cat submitted to the treatment with surprising docility, only occasionally flinching when Arthur touched a particularly sensitive spot. He seemed to understand that Arthur was trying to help. After cleaning the scratches, Arthur went inside and rummaged through his medicine cabinet. He found an old tube of antiseptic ointment, the kind he used for minor cuts and scrapes. He applied a small amount to Rusty's wounds, hoping it would prevent infection. He then brought out a bowl of milk, something he hadn't bought in years. Clara had always insisted on having milk in the house, for her tea and for baking. Arthur had kept up the habit, even though he rarely drank it himself. He poured some into a saucer and placed it before Rusty. The cat looked at the milk, then up at Arthur, as if questioning whether it was really for him. Arthur nudged the saucer closer. "Go on, drink up. You need to regain your strength." Rusty tentatively lapped at the milk, his pink tongue darting out with increasing confidence. He finished the entire saucer, then looked up at Arthur with a satisfied purr. Arthur sat on the porch steps, watching Rusty. The cat, now clean and fed, seemed much more relaxed. He began to groom himself, meticulously licking his fur, restoring it to its former fluffy glory. The setting sun cast a warm, golden glow over the garden, bathing the scene in a peaceful light. Arthur felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just relief that Rusty was okay. It was something more, a connection, a bond. He had saved this creature, this wild, thieving, independent cat, and in doing so, he had somehow saved a little piece of himself. He reached out and gently stroked Rusty's back. The cat arched into his touch, his purr growing louder. Arthur smiled. He had a feeling this was the beginning of something special. Over the next few days, Rusty stayed close to the house. He'd follow Arthur around the garden, rubbing against his legs, purring loudly. He'd sit on the porch swing with him, curled up in a ball at his feet. He even started sleeping on the welcome mat outside the back door, as if guarding the house. Arthur, in turn, found himself increasingly attached to the cat. He'd talk to him, sharing his thoughts and feelings, something he hadn't done with anyone since Clara died. He'd tell Rusty about his day, about the garden, about the memories that stirred within him as he worked among the trees and flowers. He started buying cat food, a high-quality brand with salmon, Rusty's apparent favorite. He'd set out a bowl for him every morning and evening, and Rusty would devour it with gusto. The cat still occasionally indulged in his fruit-stealing habits, but Arthur didn't mind. It was part of his charm. One evening, as Arthur was sitting on the porch swing, reading a book, Rusty jumped up beside him. He nudged Arthur's hand with his head, then curled up on the swing, his body pressed against Arthur's leg. Arthur gently stroked his fur, feeling the soft rumble of his purr. He looked out at the garden, bathed in the soft glow of the twilight. The air was still and peaceful, the only sound the gentle chirping of crickets. He felt a sense of contentment wash over him, a feeling he thought he'd lost forever. "You know, Rusty," he said softly, "you made this old house feel like a home again." The cat purred louder, as if in agreement. Arthur closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of Rusty's body against his leg, the gentle rhythm of his breathing. He was no longer alone. He had a companion, a friend, a furry, four-legged confidant. And in the quiet solitude of his autumn years, that was all he needed. The unlikely bond, forged in a moment of crisis, had blossomed into something beautiful and profound, a testament to the healing power of connection, even between a lonely old man and a mischievous ginger cat. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Arthur had experienced in years. The garden, once a place of bittersweet memories, was now filled with a new kind of joy, a vibrant energy that emanated from his unlikely companion. Rusty was no longer just a visitor. He was family. Their days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Arthur would wake early, as always, and the first thing he'd do was look out the back door to see if Rusty was waiting. More often than not, the ginger cat would be curled up on the welcome mat, his orange fur glowing in the morning light. He'd greet Arthur with a sleepy meow and a stretch, then follow him into the kitchen, rubbing against his legs as Arthur prepared his coffee and Rusty's breakfast. After breakfast, they'd head out to the garden. Arthur would tend to his plants, weeding, watering, pruning, while Rusty would supervise, his amber eyes following Arthur's every move. Sometimes, Rusty would help by batting at falling leaves, chasing butterflies, or pouncing on imaginary prey in the tall grass. Other times, he'd simply sit beside Arthur, purring contentedly, soaking up the sun. Arthur found himself talking to Rusty constantly. He'd tell him about his plans for the garden, about the birds that visited the feeder, about the memories that surfaced as he worked among the plants Clara had loved so much. He'd even read aloud to Rusty from his books, finding a strange comfort in the cat's silent companionship. Rusty, in turn, seemed to understand Arthur in a way that no one else did. He'd listen patiently, his head cocked to one side, his eyes fixed on Arthur's face. He'd purr when Arthur was happy, and he'd nuzzle against him when he sensed Arthur was feeling down. He was a constant source of comfort, a warm, furry presence that filled the emptiness of Arthur's life. One of Arthur's favorite routines was their afternoon tea on the porch. He'd brew a pot of Earl Grey, Clara's favorite, and pour himself a cup. He'd also put out a small saucer of milk for Rusty, who developed a fondness for the treat. They'd sit together on the porch swing, Arthur sipping his tea and Rusty lapping his milk, watching the world go by. The neighbors, who had initially been curious about the ginger cat that had taken up residence in Arthur's garden, now greeted him with smiles and waves. They'd seen the change in Arthur, the way he'd come alive again, and they knew the cat was responsible. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived next door, even started leaving out treats for Rusty, a small bag of catnip toys or a can of tuna. "He's a good cat, Arthur," she'd say, her voice raspy with age. "He's brought you back to life." Arthur would just smile and nod, his heart full. He knew it was true. Rusty had done more than just keep him company. He'd given him a reason to get out of bed in the morning, a purpose, a sense of belonging. One sunny afternoon, Arthur decided to plant a new rose bush, a special variety called Peace, with large, fragrant, creamy white blooms. Clara had always wanted a peace rose, but they'd never gotten around to planting one. Arthur thought it would be a fitting tribute to her, a way to honor her memory and celebrate the new joy in his life. He dug the hole carefully, preparing the soil with compost and bone meal. Rusty watched intently, his tail twitching with curiosity. As Arthur gently placed the rose bush in the hole, he felt a lump form in his throat. He remembered planting roses with Clara, their hands working together in the soil, their laughter echoing through the garden. He looked at Rusty, who was sitting patiently beside him. "This is for Clara," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "She would have loved you, you know." Rusty purred and rubbed against Arthur's leg, as if offering comfort. Arthur patted the cat's head, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. He wasn't alone. He had Rusty, and he had his memories, and he had his garden, a living testament to the love and companionship that had blossomed in his life. He finished and went to the kitchen to make himself a cup of tea. He inadvertently left the door open, and when he returned, he found Rusty had climbed onto the table, with one paw inside the sugar bowl. Arthur laughed. "Hey, that's my sugar." Rusty pulled his paw out quickly, looking guilty with sugar all over his face, and jumped off the table. The days grew shorter, the air crisper. The leaves on the trees turned vibrant shades of red, orange, and yellow, a final burst of glory before winter set in. Arthur and Rusty spent less time in the garden, preferring the warmth of the house. They'd curl up together on the sofa, Arthur reading and Rusty dozing in his lap, the gentle rumble of his purr a constant, comforting presence. The companionship that had begun in the garden had now fully bloomed, filling Arthur's home and his heart with a warmth that defied the approaching chill of winter. The first sign that something was wrong was subtle. Rusty, usually a voracious eater, started picking at his food. He'd take a few bites, then walk away, leaving most of his salmon untouched. Arthur initially attributed it to a change in the weather, or perhaps a temporary finickiness. But as the days passed, Rusty's appetite continued to decline. He also became less active. He still followed Arthur around the house, but his movements were slower, his gait less sprightly. He spent more time sleeping, curled up in his favorite spots on the porch swing, on Arthur's bed, on the soft rug in front of the fireplace. Arthur grew increasingly concerned. He tried everything he could think of to tempt Rusty's appetite. He bought different brands of cat food, even cooked him fresh chicken and fish. But nothing seemed to work. Rusty would sniff at the food, maybe take a lick or two, then turn away. One morning, Arthur woke up to find Rusty lying on the floor beside his bed, his breathing shallow and labored. He wasn't purring. Arthur knelt beside him, stroking his fur gently. Rusty opened his eyes, looking at Arthur with a weary, almost apologetic gaze. Arthur knew he couldn't delay any longer. He wrapped Rusty in a soft blanket and carried him to the car. He drove to the veterinary clinic, his heart pounding with dread. The vet, Dr. Evans, a kind, middle-aged woman with a gentle touch, examined Rusty carefully. She took his temperature, listened to his heart and lungs, and palpated his abdomen. She asked Arthur a series of questions about Rusty's symptoms, his appetite, his activity level. After the examination, Dr. Evans looked at Arthur with a somber expression. "I'm afraid I have some bad news, Mr. Miller," she said softly. "Rusty is very sick. His kidneys are failing. It's a common problem in older cats." Arthur felt a wave of grief wash over him. He knew, of course, that Rusty was an older cat. He'd estimated him to be at least 10 years old, perhaps even older. But he'd hoped they'd have more time together. "Is there anything you can do?" he asked, his voice trembling. Dr. Evans explained that there were treatments that could help manage the kidney disease, such as a special diet, medication, and subcutaneous fluids. But she also made it clear that these treatments were palliative, not curative. They could improve Rusty's quality of life, but they wouldn't reverse the damage to his kidneys. Arthur listened carefully, his mind racing. He wanted to do whatever he could to help Rusty, to make him comfortable, to give him a few more good days, weeks, maybe even months. "We'll do everything we can," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Dr. Evans gave Arthur detailed instructions on how to care for Rusty at home. She showed him how to administer the subcutaneous fluids, a process that involved inserting a needle under Rusty's skin and slowly infusing him with fluids to help flush out toxins. She also prescribed a special kidney-friendly diet and medication to help control his nausea and improve his appetite. Arthur brought Rusty home, feeling a mixture of hope and despair. He set up a comfortable bed for him in the living room, near the fireplace. He followed Dr. Evans' instructions meticulously, administering the fluids, giving him his medication, and offering him the special food. Rusty, surprisingly, tolerated the treatments well. He seemed to understand that Arthur was trying to help him. He'd lie patiently while Arthur administered the fluids, purring softly, even though the needle must have been uncomfortable. The first few days were difficult. Rusty was still weak and lethargic, and he had little interest in food. But Arthur persisted, offering him small amounts of the special food throughout the day, coaxing him to eat. He'd sit beside him, stroking his fur, talking to him in a soothing voice. Gradually, Rusty started to improve. He regained some of his appetite, and he became a little more active. He'd still spend most of his time sleeping, but he'd also follow Arthur around the house, albeit slowly, and he'd even join him on the porch for short periods. Arthur cherished every moment. He knew that Rusty's time was limited, but he was determined to make the most of it. He'd read to him, tell him stories, and simply sit with him, enjoying his presence. One evening, as they were sitting together on the sofa, Rusty curled up in Arthur's lap, his head resting on Arthur's arm. Arthur stroked his fur gently, feeling the familiar rumble of his purr. He looked down at Rusty, his heart filled with love and gratitude. "You've been a good friend, Rusty," he said softly, his voice choked with emotion. "The best friend a man could ask for." Rusty looked up at Arthur, his amber eyes filled with a depth of understanding that went beyond words. He purred louder, as if to say, "I know, and I love you too." A few weeks later, on a cold, clear November morning, Rusty passed away peacefully in his sleep, curled up in Arthur's arms. Arthur woke up to find him gone, his body still warm, but his spirit departed. He held Rusty close, tears streaming down his face. The grief was overwhelming, a deep, aching void that seemed to consume him. He had lost his companion, his friend, the creature who had brought him back from the brink of despair. He buried Rusty in the garden, beneath the old peach tree, Clara's favorite. He made a small wooden cross, carving Rusty's name into the wood. He placed a bouquet of autumn leaves and a few sprigs of rosemary on the grave, a final tribute to his beloved cat. The garden felt empty without Rusty. The silence was deafening, the absence of his purr, his playful antics, his constant companionship, a constant reminder of his loss. Arthur went through the motions of caring for the garden, but his heart wasn't in it. He missed Rusty terribly. He missed their morning walks, their afternoon tea on the porch, their evenings curled up on the sofa. He missed the way Rusty would greet him at the door, the way he'd rub against his legs, the way he'd purr when Arthur stroked his fur. But amidst the grief, there was also gratitude. Arthur was grateful for the time they'd had together, for the joy and companionship Rusty had brought into his life. He was grateful for the lessons Rusty had taught him about the power of love, the importance of connection, and the beauty of living in the moment. He knew the pain might ease with time. He stood up and looked at the small grave, the bare trees, the quiet garden. He smiled faintly. He could almost see Rusty dart between the tree, jump to catch the fruit. A tear fell on his cheek. Although it was a sad ending, he was very grateful. He softly said, "Thank you, Rusty, thank you." Then he slowly walked back to the house. The harvest of their time together was bittersweet, a mixture of sorrow and love, but it was a harvest he would cherish forever. The garden and his heart would always hold the memory of the ginger cat who had stolen his fruit and his heart and had, in the end, given him the greatest gift of all, the gift of companionship in the autumn of his life.